A lot of things don't have, well, a monkey got a hand. But anyway, just the hand. When you mix the mind and the hand together, you can make tools. And when you can make tools, you can alter your environment, right? And as time go on, man has so altered tools and altered its environment to now the earth and the creation is in imbalance. It's not balanced. And that's where we come in, and we'll get to that in a minute. But we have the ability to do something to change the environment in which we live. Why? Because we have indeed created man in the best shape, the best takwim, the best form, the best structure. The human being, you and I, we've been created like that. Now, other animals, there's no other animal or mammal in creation that can solve the problems that we have. You know why? They didn't do it. And Allah didn't give them the ability to do that. So Allah gave the ability to clean up the earth to the one that had the potential to mess it up. And that's you and I. That's the process of evolution. We evolved to that state. Now, we have indeed created man in the best molds or the best shape. Then we revert him to the lowest of the low. In other words, the human being can, in Christianity, the human being is lower than an angel, kind of like, you know. And angels have the ability to resist. You know, like Satan was said to be a fallen angel. I don't want to get all off, but Satan was said to be a fallen angel. We don't have no fallen angels in Islam because they didn't rebel, because they couldn't rebel. Allah didn't put that key in them or didn't program them to rebel, so they couldn't do what they was not programmed for, right? They just couldn't do it. Now, here you and I, the human being, we can rise higher than an angel because the truth that we find and discover and are guided by our religious guidance, that guidance is the key to solving the problem. We can use it and be above angels, or we can sink. It says we can revert you. That means send you back to the lowest of the low. That means now you're going to be below other animals. You're going to be below everything. Almost. Why? Because other animals don't have a judgment because they can't do nothing wrong. They're guided by instincts and smells and sounds, and that's what they programmed by, right? Okay, so they can't do anything wrong, therefore they're not responsible for this earth. They haven't been given the khilafah. Now, if you've been reading a lot of Christian literature, you'll see that they're changing from domination to stewardship. And remember, we as Muslims are not alone anymore in this. Literally, the whole world is witnessing a change in their environment. And the whole world wants to move toward a transformation, transforming it back to what it was. See, you can't get it no better than it was in the beginning. You know, I mean, everything working in perfect balance. Okay? Or in, as the Quran say, due proportion. I mean, you, the earth, the whole environment. All right. So, except those who believe and do good deeds, they will have a reward without ceasing. Okay, we created with the best takwim, We can rise to the highest of the high or the lowest of the low. Except those, or we'll be reverted back to the low, except those who believe and do good, and they will have a reward unceasing. Now we'll go back to a few hadith. So exalted is the righteous, learned person that he will even cause the fish to rejoice. In applying these hadith to the context of modern time, we believe that this is because such a person would enjoin goodness toward Allah's creation and pursue a clean water policy. In today's world, we hear much about the pollution of the air, the land, and the water. Most environmentalists believe that the solution lies in using man's technology to clean up lakes, streams, rivers, toxic landfills, and other sources of pollution. However, we believe a bit differently. In order to be most effective in cleaning our environment, we must go to the root of the problem. What's the root of the problem? The human being, right? Everybody want to invent something to clean up the air, to clean up the water, right? The water didn't mess itself up. The air didn't mess itself up. Who messed it up? The human being. So if you want to clean up the environment, you want to clean up the water and the air, you got to go clean up the man first. And that's called tazkiyah bil. Now, I want us to observe clearly in the environment about our nafs. How difficult is it going to be to clean up the man? How far away from reality, loving his brother, people won't even wear a mask because I don't want to wear a mask. Well, just go wear it for me, brother. You know what I mean? I don't want, you know what I mean? None of that stuff, right? So if you can't wear the mask for yourself, you feel like you've been underprivileged and over-policed, you know, is a type of insanity that 325,000 people in America, according to what they say, have already died. Of course, you can tell who most of them are. Maybe that's why they ain't no hurry. Because between the Negro, the American Indians, and Latinos passing away, you know, there's a lot of suspicion going on in the world. We don't have time to go into that. They're not conspiracy theories. They start to make sense. You know what I mean? They talk about a conspiracy theory. That's a conspiracy reality. You mean you got something going around that most of the people that die is black and American Indians, right? And Latinos and 3 or 4 white folk. We're not racist, but something is beginning to look bad. And the white folks is the one don't want to wear no mask. I don't want to wear no mask because you going against my freedom. That's the difference between freedom and responsibility, or rights and responsibilities. The human being has more responsibility than anything in the earth because he have more ability, right? So he can demand his rights. Other things cannot. We can go under the water in a submarine, up in the air with the birds, right? We can cut down all the forests, but we can also replant all the forests too, you know. So tazkiyah bil nafs. That's not the subject today, but you have to realize that in order to clean up the earth, we have to really clean up the human being. Because first of all, the people drilling all the oil wells now, I hope they don't sell this one little piece of Alaska still pristine, just like it was. But you leave it up to Don gonna sell those oil drillers, and then they're gonna drill in the Arctic, and once it's dirty, how you gonna clean up the Arctic? You know what I mean? No, we're going to have protections. He ain't had no protections on down there in Texas in the Gulf, right? Oil was shooting out of there for, when I went down to visit, I took my family down. We was in Florida, then we went over near Pensacola. We went a lot of places. But when we was in the Gulf, at that time, this several years ago, you know the tide have a water line. It was a water line all along the beach and the rocks and everything. It was oil stuck to them. And that water, it looked like you run a bathtub of water and then you just pour a quart of oil in that. That's what the water looked like down there from, okay. So we already know how they're going to protect everything, right? How many oil spills and right? They're not going to protect anything because it's all about money. Now we're getting into greed, desire, and money, and what have you. Even during this virus they got now, they said this Bezos guy, somebody, Amazon, he could give right now 80,000 people that work for him and $80,000, and he'd had the same amount of money that he had when he got started, when this virus got started a year ago. You think he's going to do it? Absolutely not. Why? Because of greed. What are you going to do with $1 billion? What are you going to buy? An aircraft carrier? You can't buy your way into heaven. You can't do anything but just get more and more greed, right? Now this is where tazkiyah bil nafs come in, because the human being have to develop a sense of community, that it's not just me being helped, but I'm going to share in my, it's like certain communities out in the countryside, they help each other build barns. They build a barn in one day because everybody go get, it costs you $500,000 now, or maybe even $1 million to build a good barn. But they get their stuff together and they put it together and they build it in one day. Why? Because they know how to build barns as good as anybody, and they do it in a collective way. Well, for instance, if we're going to prevent all this destruction of the environment, what about the people that have jobs? So if we want to rescue the fish, we have to have a moratorium on fish. Let's say we have to have a 5-year moratorium on wild fish. If you want to raise your own fish somewhere, you could raise them, okay? But what about all the fishermen that don't have no money? The ones that have money have to share their money, right? Or the government has to regulate things to where they share their money. You know, the middle class in America that kicked in big in the 40s, the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. After that, it started declining. But the middle class came from high wages and what else? 94% tax bracket? It was 91%, 96 or 94, something like that. That means those people that made big money, they was way up there in that tax bracket. And then they could help with schools, they could help build better universities, they could do whatever they wanted, and they could help me and you because they had the money. Now, what Warren Buffett said, he pays less taxes than his secretary. This is insanity. This is what they say in the news, They write books about it. His secretary, pay more taxes than he do. And he's a up to billionaire, whatever he is. Okay. So now we're getting into tazkiyah bil nafs, purification of the self. Tazkiyah, the same word for zakah and all of that. Zakat, that's what, It means to cleanse and purify. You cleanse your wealth by giving some of it away. And that's a pillar of Islam. Okay, so now if we have oil workers and they want to drill all the oil and pump it down to the Gulf of Mexico from Canada, right? Then instead of destroying the environment, they're going to have some income, some new training, and all of those things. Well, what this means is, in reality, we have to design a new world that we want to live in. Same thing we've been always talking about. It's new world time. The world that we design. So that means that the human being that think like us, they have to in some way get together and visualize the world they want to live in. Right? The type of system that they want. They don't want that old stuff that never was meant for you and you, like so-called democracy. Y'all remember those Thomas Jefferson letters we would, that we would read sometimes to some of these demonstrations? And Thomas Jefferson had a long section in there on slavery, but he could never put it in the Declaration of Independence. Why? Because some of the rich guys like himself, the farmers, and all of the other people up in the North and the South, and industrialists didn't want him to put that in there, right? And if you look right now, they had a movie about Abraham Lincoln, and he was about to kill himself almost, trying to get the 13th Amendment. Y'all remember, anybody see that movie? The only thing about the 13th Amendment was, what does it say? From now on, it ain't going to be nobody held in bondage because, or mistreated because of past slavery, except those that have been convicted of a crime. Now you can see why the police is always in our neighborhood. Why was the chain gangs in the South always full, always full? Because they had little petty stuff. It's nigger catching time. They were just like the slave laws. Remember the books we just breezed through, the titles that the modern police setup is designed based off old slave patrols. That's what they're doing. Okay. But for white folks that own property, not poor white folks, that Constitution was a big deal. It was a whole transformation from kingship, landed gentry, and the priestly class. It was a big deal getting away from that. You know what I mean? And in what they call liberty for them, hey, they had the freedom to do what they want. Right? Especially with me and you. I don't want to get off in this subject, but I want you to think about the Declaration of Independence and how it talks. If government don't live up to these, every man is created equal, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? And if you can't get that from the government, then you have a right, a responsibility to change that government. Isn't that what the Declaration of Independence says? And the same people, you didn't see a whole lot of poor people at the Constitutional Convention. Ben Franklin, he was the first millionaire in America. Thomas Jefferson, go down there and look at what he used to own. George right down there in Mount Vernon, them boys was having money, right? They were the wealthy people. The governors and all of that, okay. So they wanted independence from King George so they could get more money, so they could get more powerful, right? And so, but they didn't have you and me fixed in there. Why? Because they have all those flowery discourses about the Declaration of Independence, but what happened when the Constitution when they wrote the Constitution. Same people wrote the Constitution.